Welcome to my video about how to start positive reinforcement. If you're new to positive reinforcement, I'll be starting you from scratch today. So this is lesson 1 for week 1, and I'll explain why it's for week 1 a little bit later. So my name is Lara Coventry Cox, and this here is Cuba. He is a splashed white paint horse. And my method is Mahi Mahi Method, which is a method that I created myself because I have been using positive reinforcement professionally for over 35 years now. So I started professionally when I was 15 years old, and it is the only method I've used, so it's become completely natural to me, or it's so natural that I can't even help doing it. It's just has become part of me. So I just want to explain the method that I use and to help you get going so that you know exactly where to start and start from scratch and do it properly. So while I give Cuba a good old scratch, because he just did yoga to get to this part of his back, I thought I'd give him a hand and scratch it for him. He's loving it. So, as I was saying, this is going to be lesson 1, week 1. Now, the reason it's lesson 1, week 1 is that there's many things I've learned over just the most recent years, and that is about learning, about humans learning, because my whole life I've concentrated on animals. Now, when it comes to humans learning, the key is repetition. Now, make it clear, I'm saying that is about humans. So I'm not at this stage talking about animals. So as far as you learning positive reinforcement, repetition is key. And so what I'm going to run you through in this video today is something that I need you to do every day for a week. You need to watch the video every day for a week. And that is so that it sinks in, because each time you watch a video, you might pick up 10% of it, and you don't always get the full picture. Now, if you watch it over and over again, you will start to make it a habit, and it will keep you on track. Ugh, dirty fingers. It'll keep you on track so that you have a plan and you know where to go with your horse and or dog. So let's stick to horses for today. I think Cuba has we got the itch, didn't we? Even though he'd love me to keep going all day. So what I'm going to run you through next is what you need to start. So what you need to start for positive reinforcement is you need a horse, first of all. You also need a bum bag, preferably a bum bag. Now, if you don't have a bum bag or you can't get a bum bag, then big pockets is a good idea. But to be honest, it does become problematic if you're using pockets, because they're quite hard to get into. Sometimes you're sitting on them if you're riding your horse, and they don't always have a zip or something on top so that rewards might come out while you're moving. So when you go looking for a bum bag, ideally one that has a zip on it, because you can close it if you're riding, because I use the same system when I'm riding as well. You might be doing some liberty and running along the ground with your horse too, and if it doesn't have a zip, they could all come flying out, which has happened to me a few times. So bum bag, good bum bag that you can move around, one that's not going to flop about as well when you ride, so one you can adjust. Just makes life a little easier. And one with other pockets is also super cool, because then you can keep your phone and other things in there all in at the same time. So you need a bum bag, you need the horse, and you need the rewards. So the rewards that I use are a biscuit about that size. That's about 1/4 of an inch. I have no idea when it comes to measurements. Is that 2 centimeters? It's not even. It looks to me like it's 1 centimeter cubed, roughly. Cuba, biscuit cubed. So that's what I use as my reward, is one at a time. And the reason I don't use lots of little ones is it gets too messy. They're hard to grab. You end up dropping them, and if you've got chickens, which I do, you end up with chickens all around your feet because they're picking up all the loose biscuits. So sometimes I've had a few chickens get trodden on when I was doing lessons in the early days. I remember a few times using small biscuits because I couldn't find anything the right size. So when it comes to your reward, obviously make sure it's something that you are comfortable feeding your horse. If you have something that your horse isn't allowed to eat or shouldn't eat, just check the ingredients. This is the only actual man-made food I'll ever feed my horses, is the reward. To everything else, I just stick to plain ingredients so that I know exactly what's in it. But this one, I have done my research. This is Biomare, and none of my horses have ever had a problem with that. So totally up to you, but that is what I find easiest. It's really quick, it's really easy. And the reason I don't use chopped up carrot is carrot can be problematic sometimes. It takes a little too long to chew. And while we're doing these lessons with our horses and doing positive reinforcement, we want to keep their attention and we want to keep them active and concentrating on the job at hand. And if they're too busy chewing for half an hour on a piece of carrot, it kind of distracts from what we're doing. Now, speaking of distracting from what we're doing, you might be thinking, why is that horse tipping his head on the side? Why is Cuba doing that? So Cuba has been taught to yawn on cue. So right now, he's trying to solicit a biscuit out of me. That's his way of saying, hey, come on, give me a biscuit. So he's already learned how to yawn on cue. I should be specific about that. I'm not going to reward him because I didn't ask him to do it. It's just his way of getting something out of me because he's decided he wouldn't mind a biscuit or two. Of course, he uses the easiest trick in the book to do that with. He never puts in much effort because he's the most sleepy horse on the planet, as you can see. It's not going to work, Cuba. So the next thing that you need, apart from the horse, apart from the bum bag, apart from the rewards, you need what we call a bridge. And there's so many people in positive reinforcement who I actually don't ever hear them talking about the bridge, even though they're using one. People who are doing it professionally are all using a bridge, but they don't seem to talk about it. They talk about it, they use a different word. So I'll explain what a bridge is and why it's called a bridge. So when we are teaching any kind of behavior, we need to communicate with the horse that what they are doing is correct. And we need the horse to understand the very, very moment that it is correct, not a few seconds later, not a few seconds before, because you always will end up with a different behavior altogether than what you're actually looking for if you don't use a bridge. So, a bridge. First of all, let me explain why it's called a bridge. We have the behavior over here, the horse is doing the behavior, and then we have the reward. You can't always give the reward at the right time, meaning you can't communicate to the horse, that's the very moment. This moment is the moment, the best peak of the behavior. You can't quickly go, here, eat that biscuit right now, just as a communication tool. You can't do that in most cases. So the reason we have a bridge is there's the behavior, there's the reward, and the thing in between is a bridge. So it's the bridge between the behavior and the reward. I hope that makes sense. So that's why it's called a bridge. Now, what a bridge is, this will make the penny drop if you still don't quite get what I'm talking about, is you see people using a clicker or a whistle. When I was a marine mammal trainer, we used to use a whistle, a dog whistle. It's a high-pitched dog whistle that everybody can hear. Horses, dogs, humans, we can all hear it. But we used to use our tongue on the end of the whistle and it would be super short, sharp, like really, really short and sharp whistle. It was handy because we had it around our neck and we would just hold it in our mouth when we were ready to use, and we would have hands free. So we could always use a whistle anytime we needed it. Now there's people who use a clicker. Some people have a clicker on their belt, so it's hanging there. They grab for the clicker and click, and it goes tick, tick. It's quite slow. So I have an opinion about a clicker. It's fine. Whoever wants to use a clicker, and if you're already using a clicker, that's perfectly fine if it works for you. I feel that it's a little bit slow. It's not quite as short, sharp, and precise, and you don't always have your clicker with you. The other thing is when you reach for a clicker, if you've got it hanging off you somewhere, this is a pre-cue, which means your horse will notice you going for the clicker before you actually click. And if you think that they don't notice things like that, they so do. They notice everything. Things that humans don't notice, they notice. So this is one of the reasons I don't really like to use a clicker, is because if you're not going to hold it in your hand permanently, you need to reach for it, and that is a pre-cue. So they know before you click that the click is coming, which could then degrade the behaviours, because they could stop doing, instead of reaching the peak of the behaviour, they could stop when they see you reach for it because you're getting ready to click at the peak. So the other thing is, let's say you don't have a clicker hanging off your belt or wherever, you keep it in your hand permanently. I find that really problematic because we need two hands. Ideally, we don't want to be carrying something in our pocket. It's perfect if we just have two hands free, especially with horses. We never know what we might need to be holding or doing. It just makes life a lot easier. So that's why I don't use a whistle or a clicker. So now that I've explained what I don't use as a bridge, what I do use for a bridge is my voice. So the reason I use my voice is because I always have my voice with me. It means anywhere I go, anything I do, I can always have a bridge ready to go. I don't need to grab for it. No one sees it coming. And I can literally be doing anything with my horse any time of the day or wherever I am with them. Not just in training sessions, not just, when we're deliberately out there to be running through behaviours or tricks or whatever it is that you're wanting to teach your horse. It means that you have it all everywhere you go. So the next thing is the word that I use. I use the same word every time, which is extremely important. So I use the word good. And the reason I use the word good, it's got so many reasons why. Because first of all, good means good. It comes out naturally. So for most people, when their horse or animal of whatever kind is being good, you can't help but say good. So the fact that it comes naturally, there's a few things involved there. It makes life easy for everybody, first of all. And second of all, when you speak and have emotion about anything, your body screams, oozes that emotion. And so when I use the word good, my body says good. Whether I know it or not, my body is saying good when I say good. Now, this for a horse is so handy because, as we all know, horses and so many animals, in fact, most all animals, use body language to communicate as well as sound. But they are so switched on to body language that humans just aren't. What a human can pick up versus what your horse can pick up. The horse is way more onto it than any person would be. So when I say the word good, it's written all over me, basically. So they don't just hear it, but they can also see it. So the other reason is using good. When you say it, you need to mean it. So I say this about pretty much everything, is say it like you mean it, do it like you mean it, and it just happens. That's how life works. It's about energy and focus and timing, and whatever you say, as long as you mean it, it will show. So now the next part about the fact that I use the word good is when I say good, I have to say the word in the same way every single time. It's the same as if you were using a whistle. The whistle is the same whistle every time. The click is the same click every time. So when you say good, it needs to be the same good every time. So what I mean by that is if you're choosing to use good as your bridge, you need to say good. If that's how you're going to say it, you need to say it the same way every time so that they understand, because they'll associate that's the word. It's not you saying, good boy. It's completely different. It's not the same at all. So you need to get into the habit. And this is another reason why I was suggesting you need to go through this for a whole week, the same lesson for a whole week, because a lot of people, they slip into habits that they may have already formed where they naturally say, good boy. Well, it's not ideal to use that as your bridge because it's too long. And it's not as precise. There are more advanced reasons why I can explain that in another video of why I save the good boy for later. But in this lesson today, being the very, very beginnings of positive reinforcement, simply use the word good And if that's how you're going to say it, make sure you say it the same every time. Good. And then you give him a biscuit. So here comes the details on how to start positive reinforcement. So you've got what you need. You have your horse, you have your bum bag, the rewards, and you have your bridge, the word good. So how do you teach your horse that good means good? It's so easy. It's so easy. I'll show you. So basically, you need to start this week with your horse. Every single time you are with your horse, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Don't start teaching behaviors or tricks. Just start being with your horse. Whatever it is that your horse is doing good, whatever it is, standing still. Let's say you have a horse that doesn't stand still very well. Cuba, on the other hand, is pretty good at that because he is very, very lazy. So for him, it's not really something I need to emphasize and teach him or ask him to do. So everyday life with your horse. Let's say Cuba doesn't like standing still and he's standing still now. I would say, good, and I would give him a biscuit. So he'd hear me say good, and then after he's heard me say good, he gets a biscuit. And he's still standing still. I would say good and give him a biscuit. He's still standing still. So I say good and give him a biscuit. Now, from my experience, I can tell you, if you're being consistent and you're saying good the same way every time, and after the word good, you're giving them a biscuit, they usually take, from my experience, from 3 goes. I'm not joking. There are some horses who after the 3rd go, they go, wait a minute. When she says that word good, I get a biscuit. And they start going, as soon as you say the word good, they go, where's my biscuit? Because they're like onto you already. So that's really, really cool. If you have a horse like that, it generally speaking means they're going to be very quick to learn, but they're also very quick to make up other stuff along the way. So there's like a catch-22 with the horses sometimes. Now, sometimes horses might take longer. They might take up to 10 times, and some up to 20. It's very, very rare for me to have seen it take that long. So now back to your everyday life with your horse. I've just suggested, let's say standing still is a thing. So because you're going to start this week with your horse, you need to, whatever it is that you do with your horse, let's say you go to the paddock to catch your horse, and if you have to catch your horse, there might be something to work on straight away. But generally speaking, I can't get rid of mine. They're all over me. And it's not just for food, it's because they love what they do. So we need to start our everyday life with good behavior. So let's say you are saddling up your horse and your horse is standing perfectly. You've thrown the saddle on and your horse is standing there perfectly, done everything right. So you say good and you give him a biscuit. And then you need to pick out his feet. And it's something he already does. He picks up his foot and you say good and you give him a biscuit. And then you might be brushing up here and sometimes they're not too keen on that, so you start slowly, you reach to there and they don't make a fuss about it and you say good and you give him a biscuit. This is what I'm talking about when I say everyday life. So this becomes literally a way of life. It doesn't become something you use just to teach tricks or behaviors or whatever it is. It's not just a tool for other times. It's a tool for everyday life, and it's a way of communicating with your horse. It means that once they've learnt this system, they will always know when they're being good, and they do want to please you. They start to love what they're doing. They start to look for new things, and they start looking at you and paying attention because they're like, wow, this is like a new game for them. So anything that you do in your everyday life this week with your horse, if you couldn't do this and they walk around and, you know, this is just basic stuff, but it doesn't matter how basic it is. If it means that you need your horse to stand still when you walk behind him, you need to brush him, you need to pick up his feet, you need to brush his tail, anything that it is, if they're being good, you say good and you give him a biscuit straight away. They know after you spending a whole week doing this, they'll surely know that when you say good, they get a biscuit. That means they are learning the system, and the system is positive reinforcement. That's how easy it is. So that's your task for this week, is everyday life with your horse. Don't start new things. Just continue your everyday life with your horse with the things that they already do. And every time they are good, you say good and you give him a biscuit. And just remember, not good boy. Just keep it simple. Say good and give him a biscuit. So by now, your horses are starting to learn what good means. They're starting to understand your communication. They're knowing what good means, and they're understanding that there's a reward to follow. Just one reward, remember. Now, one thing that I wanted to cover, even in the beginnings, just as an understanding, talking about positive reinforcement, there's a lot of people who are learning positive reinforcement because they might want to teach their horse to lay down or teach their horse to yawn on cue, or they might want to teach them to bow or rear up on cue. All of these fancy tricks, as people call them, for want of a better word. In the marine mammal world, we call everything they do, we call behaviours. It is a behaviour, but anyway, let's not get into the politics of things. So what the message is I'm trying to get across is, apart from your everyday life, because that's what you're doing this week, is spending your everyday life using positive reinforcement for just the ease of communicating to your horse that, wow, that you did so well standing still when I put the saddle on. I really appreciate it, and I'll tell you that you're good. Now, what I'm wanting to cover is that, as I was saying before, positive reinforcement isn't just for tricks or behaviours. Positive reinforcement is so incredibly handy for everything. And I'm not just talking about what I was saying before with the everyday life of saddling up or picking out feet or anything like that. It also is extremely handy when it comes to things like vet care or personal care for your horse, things that they don't necessarily like or want you to do, but we know for their own good. For example, we know for their own good there's lots of things we need to do for our horses. Like, you can notice that Cuba has pink skin and he has some white stuff on his eyelid there. He doesn't really like it when I put that on, but for his own good he needs to wear it because he has the pink skin, and otherwise he'll get sunburnt. So he wears zinc on a regular basis until it wears off, and then I put more on. So he's used to it and he knows what I do. He still doesn't like it though, but I can have a cooperation with him because I use positive reinforcement. So I don't need to put a twitch on him or twist his ear or get 6 people to hold him. So yeah, you hold him while I put the stuff on his face. There's none of that stuff in my life with my horses because we don't have a fight about anything. It's all like we have an understanding. If you can just please let me do this, I'll be very, very gentle. I'm not trying to hurt you, and they appreciate it in the end. So I'm going to get him out of this thinking about yawning as well. He knows we're on the lesson at the moment. So what I'm going to show you as an example of how this works, and this is as far as timing is concerned. In my little box of goodies here, I have some filter back, which is what Cuba already has on his eye. I'm going to put some on my hand. Keep the pot away because I've learnt that inevitably I end up treading on the pot and spilling the whole thing and wasting $80. So Cuba doesn't like it, right? So I may need to hop on the other side because generally speaking I might stand over here. So because he doesn't like it, he doesn't want me to do it. He knows already that's what's on my on my hand. I'm going to say good and give him a biscuit. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be very, very calm and gentle in my approach. I'm not going to reach straight for the part where the eye is. I'm not going to go, hey, I want to put this on your eye. So first of all, I'm going to be smart about it and be calm and gentle and loving, just as you should be with everything. And then I'm going to start where it's not needed, because he doesn't mind here, because the pink skin, generally speaking, is quite sensitive. So I'll start somewhere where it's not needed, and then I slowly work my way up. Let's say this is amazing for you to get this far with your horse. You'd say good, and you'd give him a biscuit. The other thing is no rushing. You don't need to get this done in a hurry. It just needs to be done properly. And then you go good, and you give him a biscuit. I can even get this on the line so that he still looks his beautiful self without me going over the dark bit, because I can be that precise because of how gentle and accepting he can be. Good boy. So I've got the part right there that needs the filter back on it, because he's already an expert. I'll just show you something now. He doesn't like it on his nose. So I'm going to try and show you something where he's actually going to show that he doesn't like it, rather than he didn't make any fuss then, which is, you know, it's great, but it's because of the time and effort and work I've put into him. And patience, I should say, time, effort and patience I've put in, which is the other thing you need if you're going to start positive reinforcement. You need to start at stage 1 and not stage 10. Good boy. Good. As I get further down, he doesn't like it. It's just typical. I've been through this my whole life. Don't work with animals or children, because they always prove you wrong. So here's me saying that he will make a fuss, and so he doesn't. We've covered lots about what we can use positive reinforcement for: vet care training, personal care, and for everyday life. And there's also the cool part, which is the tricks. So is that what we should finish off on? Let's see if we can get Cuba to lay down, shall we? It's lucky we have a pivot, because it should follow Cuba and not me. Sometimes he does a little circle before he lays down. He just likes to test the ground and make sure it's a nice comfy piece for him to lay down on. And he'll turn around a few times. Good boy. And now I'm guessing he's not in the camera. Am I right? He might be, but he might not be. Good, Cuba. If not, you stay there for a minute. I'm just going to move this camera back a little bit so that you can see. That Cuba has laid down. I'm not sure, because I couldn't catch that, whether he was in the camera or not, but just in case you didn't see. And every time without fail that I have done this, he turns and faces his back to the camera instead of the other way around. This is actually a really cool thing to teach a horse if you're breaking them in. When I break in a horse, I teach them to lay down first. Not first, but it's one of the things I do teach them. And it's because when you get to know them and they get to know you, you can do things like this. And it means that when it is time for you to get on the back, there's so much more that they've ended up getting used to. I'm not putting my weight on him. I'm just sitting here holding most of my own weight, but it's something that can come in handy. So all these things, some people are like, what's the point in teaching them to lay down? There's a point to a lot of things we do. Like, we can stand up in the saddle on a horse, and people say, what's the point in that? Well, if you can stand up in the saddle of a horse, it's kind of a bit of proof that there's a lot of trust there. And if there's trust, it means you have a good relationship. And if you have a good relationship, that's better than a good olden days force, bash, crash, and break in a horse, where that's not what I do. If I'm working with a horse, I make sure everything is kept calm and happy, and we have a good relationship. So that's that. Cuba is loves going to sleep, especially because it's hot. Anyway, I think it's a bit too hot for us to stay out here, so we are going to leave it at that. And I hope you enjoyed the video today on learning all about the basics of positive reinforcement. Now remember, this is week 1, lesson 1, week 1, meaning you need to do the same lesson for a week. You need to use repetition so that it sinks in, so that you learn it, so that it becomes a natural way of being for you with your horse from here onward. If you always reward with the word good, for the rest of your days with your horse, your relationship will become really, really cool. They'll understand you, you can understand them, and you can communicate in so many ways that you didn't know previously. Don't stress if you can't do your 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is that you have to spend with your horse. If you can't do that every day, don't worry about that, because it will all still work. Just every time you're with your horse, even if it's only once a week, or if it's on weekends, you only see your horse on weekends, it will still work. You just need to be consistent, and consistency is key. So that's it from me. Be consistent, be calm, and be good. And maybe you'll get a biscuit too. I'll see you next time. All of what I've said about using your voice, and when I said that when you use your voice, your body has got it written all over you. If you say something like you mean it, and horses pick up on body language. So when I say good, I mean good, because I actually mean it, because yes, you were really good, so I can say the word good. Now, there's something I didn't mention about Cuba in the beginning of the video. Cuba is deaf. He's a splashed white paint horse, and we know him to be at least 98% deaf. So he can hear some things, and that's why he does still move his ears. Some deaf horses I've worked with, they have floppy ears. They kind of sit outwards like this. Now, because of this is why I've saved it till last, is that although Cuba is deaf, I still do exactly the same thing with him as I do with the other horses. There are a few different things that I use doing some other behaviours like lunging. I have hand cues for him instead of simply a voice cue. I have a cue for walking, a cue for trotting, and a cue for cantering, for example. Now, my point here being is that when I say good, Cuba still knows that I've said the word good, even though he didn't hear me. And it's because of my body language. And that is what I mean when I say you need to say things like you mean it and stick to the same thing every time. And because I'm consistent with that, he still understands, even though he can't hear me. So that's just an example of how good you can get it. If you make sure you're very consistent and that you say what you mean and mean what you say, use it the same way every single time, they will still know. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got a lot out of that. And make sure you keep going with this for a whole week at least. If you don't have the time with your horse, remember, just keep going even longer until it does happen. Wait for those light bulb moments and you'll know when it does happen. Just get to know your horse. Have fun with your horse. And we'll see what we can do next time. Are you ready to go to sleep now? I think it's time to go to the beach. It's so hot. What do you reckon?